One second, there we go. Sorry about that. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to episode 9 of our MakerBot Chats. Today, we'll be talking about quite an exciting piece of equipment, the MakerBot Sketch. Not only Sketch, but I would say just single extrusion as a whole. You know, how does it work? When do you use it? What are some of the features of the Sketch printer? And of course, as always, any of the questions that you guys might have. I have a new camera today, so hopefully you'll be able to see me much clearer the image, but we'll see. As I was saying, I was very excited last week to get the MakerBot Sketch here for the first time. Again, I'm still staying at home, so basically still in my living room, and I had to make space for the Sketch. Not a lot. This is basically give me 1 second just to double check one thing on the audio. I froze for a bit. Let's see. Keep just having some technical glitches. So let me quit a few of the things, and hopefully we'll be back. I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. I'll assume that's working. So, as I was saying, yes, last week I finally got the Sketch printer here. Of course, I had used it before, back at the office when we first launched. We introduced this printer back in February, if I'm not mistaken, right before everything just sort of hit the fan. But we hadn't had the opportunity to do a deep down look at the printer. You know, how does it print? What is it for? Who is it for? What are the general differences between the Sketch and the Method? I have the Method still over here, and I use it for some other, different projects. I can show you one of them actually later on, but anyways. Today we're going to focus on single extrusion, which is what both Sketch and the Rafts have. That means that they are going to be printing with a single nozzle, right? Single extrusion, single material. And let's start with that. Let's start with just like a rundown of the printer and what are the key differences between single extrusion and dual extrusion. So with Sketch, you have a single material bay. It's also enclosed and covered. So you remove this plastic cover over here. I'll just put it on top of the printer for now. And here's where you have your spool, right? The spool is very similar than in the Method. Again, it's single material, single color. That means it's a little bit more straightforward. Sketch is a printer that's made for the classroom specifically, right? I wouldn't say personally that it's just limited for the classroom, just because, having used the Rafts before, both at work, at home, and then seeing it used at schools, it's just, depending on the application, that might be what you need in any case, right? So the Sketch is a great printer to get started. It's a great printer to just get those ideas out, and those, let me close the door here. The door is also magnetic, so as you saw, like it just latches on. But it's a great way to start with simple prototypes. And sometimes I say simple, but that just means that it's going to print a single material, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that the geometries are limited. Like, for example, I printed a few examples. All of these were printed without supports, and we'll talk about a little bit about the differences between printing with supports and without supports. But, the quality itself, it's amazing. So all of these prints that I'm showing you right now, I printed on this very specific machine, right? One of the big things or questions that we keep getting from the Sketch is, how big can it print? Some people think that it's going to be similar to what the Mini, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but what the MakerBot Mini used to be. And it's completely not the case. So I actually printed a cube that is basically the full build volume. So as you can see, okay, step 2, not only the material, but also the whole printer is enclosed, right? Unlike the Rafts, this actually comes with a fully sealed environment. It's not heated, it's not like Method where you have a fully enclosed chamber that is also heated up, that controls the temperature. In the Sketch case, you only have a heated build plate, but the build plate is enough for you to print, let me get this out. To get the build plate out of the printer, you just press it down and then push it out. And this is kind of our maximum build volume. It's actually pretty big. It's this cube, so I printed it overnight. It's 140 by 140 cube millimeters. That's going to be roughly 4.5, I think close to 5 cubic inches, and you know, it's just the layer and the smoothness of the part is really impressive. Also, the fact that, you know, you don't always need support for some of these more complex parts. You can see how clearly and detailed those logos are. I just branded the cube with MakerBot Sketch. And to remove your part from the build plate, it's a similar process than with Method. This build plate, it's fairly flexible. I wouldn't say that it's entirely flexible, but it definitely has some give to it. So I can just flex the part. You can hear it cracking, right? And I'll go around the part. There we go. Last bit. I'll just show it to the camera right here. There we go. Look how clean that came out of the build plate, right? And that's because of the fact that the grip surface here is the same as in Method, and the heated build plate makes it just adhere so well. So this is the raft, right? The raft is going to be our first layer, the actual sort of quite literal raft upon which the print is going to be printed on. The reason why we use a raft is just to make sure that that first layer is as smooth as possible, completely even throughout the part. And the raft, you know, it's really easy to remove, especially when it's just a single material, right? So you can see it cracking in the same way that you know, the build plate cracked off, and that's it, right? I got my raft, I got my part, and the part, as I was saying, it's like fairly big. You can see it's about the size of my hands, right? The printer itself can go a little bit larger, so it can do, the maximum build volume is 150 millimeters. That's, you know, a tad extra in each direction. The reason why I didn't go to 150 and this stayed at 140 is because I was using the raft. If you disable the raft on the sketch, you will be actually able to expand the build volume of the printer itself. And I'll show you how that looks in a bit. But as you can see, like, the build volume itself is not limited at all in the sketch, right? And especially because of the fact that you have the heated build plate, unlike what happens with the Rev Plus, here you actually have technically a little bit more usable real estate. I would say that the heated build plate makes it so that all of the build plate can be filled up with parts. In this case, I just filled up, you know, the cube throughout the whole part, and it just gives you more effective real estate with the printer. I'll just put this one right here for a second. So we talked about the build plate. Inside of the printer, you have the single nozzle right here. It's got an LED that actually helps you sort of see the part as it prints. And one other thing that is really amazing, I think for me is incredibly useful, especially when printing at home, right, is how quiet this is. And I'll just have it run for a second because I want to hear you guys. Let me just clean a small chunk here that stayed on the printer. There we go. I just want you guys to hear how quiet the printer itself is. And here you go. I am printing using the USB drive, so that's another thing. You can print via Ethernet, you can print via Wi-Fi, or you can print via a USB key, which is what I'm going to do right now. Select here your files. It also has a touchscreen, just like the Method does. Very intuitive interface. I think that's one of the things that we pride the most out of in MakerBot. How easy to use are these products, because it's just, you know, basically what you would expect from any new tech product. So let's see. Here we go. Selecting that cube. Click start, and that's it. You probably cannot hear anything. And that's because the printer is so quiet. Let me bring you guys closer for a second. So you'll see, oh, that was actually my charger falling down on the printer. But the printer itself started heating up already. You know, you can see it right here in the screen. And in a second, the nozzle is going to come down and it'll start printing. I'll bring you guys closer again when that process starts. But for now, the thing to point out is just how quiet the printer is, right? Also, safety first, especially because this printer is thought to be, you know, a printer dedicated for schools. I think, especially nowadays with most kids out of school, you know, because of the whole situation. The other good thing about this printer is that it can be placed just at home, right? I like it a lot because of how quiet it is. I like it that it doesn't take a lot of space. Method is definitely something that you can use at home, but it's better suited for the office, better suited for the professional environment. But Sketch right now, especially thinking about the kids that are not out there at school, it's a great way to spend time creating stuff. And I'll go through some of the experiments that I've been working with Sketch. So creating stuff that doesn't need to be simple by any means, right? So it could be just learning about geometry. In this case, I have basically edited the platonic shapes, starting with a cube, doing a hypercube, so a cube within a cube within a cube. You can see how it's a really interesting shape. I like it a lot. Kind of, some people call it the tesseract. I don't think that that's correct. But anyways, it's just like first starting with a cube hollowed out. Then I've got an icosahedron. Oh, here we go. So it's the extruder is lowering, the printing process is starting, and it's just as quiet as it can be, right? It's here I can barely listen to it. So really quiet printer, awesome for the classroom, awesome for me here at home, and I would say like just plain awesome for kids, right? Just to get started with complex shape, an icosahedron, two different sizes, and here's the interesting bit. So these this icosahedron I showed you guys in one of the previous episodes was printed on a Rep 2 about 5 years ago. I kept it because I really like the shape. I re-edited and made this one in Sketch. And if you look inside, right? Where am I here? Let me get you guys there. Here we go. Those strings, you can see how they are hanging. That's mainly because of how the Rep 2 used to print. In Sketch, the bridging, basically that ability to print without supports and to span across longer sections of the print without having a support, it's just unbelievably awesome. I mean, I think that the cube is a better example for that, just because it's a little bit more clear how clean it jumps between the different beams of the cube. So this part specifically was printed. Let me see. Here we go. So this cube was printed that way, right? That means that all of these spans were like completely freestanding as it was printing. And just look at the lack of stringing or overhangs that happened here as a cube. It's just really clean, even without supports. I haven't printed anything with supports with Sketch so far, just because I was testing this, straightforward geometries. Also, dodecahedron, so that means dodeca means 12 hedron sides, so 12 sides. And the same story is true, right? It's just like really clean parts, no support whatsoever. I need to print one part with supports, but the big difference with the supports that Sketch generates versus what Method generates, it's going to be the fact that the supports are going to be the same, made out of the same material as the part. And once you're done, unlike what happens with Method, when you dunk the part in water, you'll have to manually remove those supports from the part, right? You'll have to just apply them out. It's a fairly straightforward process, just different, not as suited for more complex parts. But even with single extrusions, you can do fairly interesting assemblies. This one I printed out on my Rep Plus. It's basically it's a test to do how's it called, like a gripper element. So you can see how it opens and closes as I push and pull this. Oops, it broke, so I apologize for that. But it opens and closes as I push up and down this piston rod, the white piston right here. And again, single extrusion doesn't necessarily mean limited prints or limited geometries. It just means that some of them will be more challenging. Some of them, especially like the ones that have very complex internal sections, probably will not be able to print. But that still means that you can do a lot of robotics with these printers. You can do a lot of different geometry applications with the printers. And I am going to show you now in MakerBot Print how does that look. So fading here to MakerBot Print. I have already the cube that I was showing you before. Selected Sketch already. So here you can see the printers that I've been using. So Method, Method X, the Z18, the Replicator Plus. In this case, we're talking about, so just to be clear, the three of them, Z18, Rep Plus, and Sketch are single extrusions, so they will all have just the one material, and that material will be printing both the part and the supports. And here, if I go to settings, select the supports, I'll select breakaway, right? So specifically this cube, I know that can be printed without supports because I designed it to be that way. However, if you had something a little bit more complex that does require supports, you'll see in a minute how that looks like. This is going to present us or to render that same cube with supports and where would it be needing the supports. As I said before, here I know that it's possible to span those elements, those columns basically without supports because it's right at the limit. It's about 2 inches apart from each of these vertical columns, and that's enough for the printer to be able to span across the part. Some other parts that have a little bit more complex supports, you won't be able to do that, and you'll see in a minute as this renders out how does that look like. But you can see that I also have many of the same settings that we've been seeing before from Method. The big difference here is that I just have one extruder, so it's just a Sketch extruder. And by the way, the extruder itself, it's also replaceable, super easy, in a similar way than that of Method. You cannot have, you don't have the Labs extruder, you don't have other material extruders so far or yet. But it's also it's a modular element that you can take out of the machine, replace it, and then if something went wrong, just have a fairly easy fix on the printer. It's generating the preview now, so jumping back here. And while the preview is being generated, Alejandra, and big shout out to her, she's collecting some of your comments back in YouTube. So do send out the comments. Oh, there you go. That's the preview. Send out the comments and questions that you have, and we'll be starting to run through them. But so the printer is printing right now, right? It's very noticeable. Let's jump back to the printer for a second while the preview is being generated, because I really want to show you how quiet this is, right? It's printing right now. Now, unlike what happens with Method, Sketch doesn't have a sensor in the door, which means I can actually open the door and this will not stop the printing process. But you can hear how quiet this is, right? It's just making barely any sound at all, and it's printing, right? So awesome for the classroom, awesome for the living room, right? That's how I've been using it. I think that many people who are now, safely stuck inside, I would say, would really benefit from having such a printer because it's just quiet. You can use it. You can do a lot of things with it, especially for kids that are out of school thinking about the summertime. What are you going to do with all that time? Getting projects out of this machine, and that's something that I want to do as a follow-up for these chats. It's just something amazing for kids. I would, as a kid, I would have Legos and whatnot, but here you're allowed to create your own sort of toys. You're allowed to experiment a little bit more than what you have or what you're able to do with just a simple toy. Jumping back to MakerBot Print, where the preview is now done. The orange elements are basically those support elements that are generated by our slicer. They are a different color, but once we print them, they will be made out of the same material than the model itself, right? So that's the same blue cube that I have right here. The slicer is telling me that I will need supports here, so it's creating supports in all of these open spans. As I've showed with this one, you don't necessarily need them. You can actually push the limits a little bit of how much supports do you need once you know what are the potential of the printer, if you know the geometry, if you can control it a little bit more. But in any case, it's just a simple process generating supports. This is an 18-hour print. It's about the full volume of the printer. This cube is about a fourth of that volume, so I scaled it down just to make it print a little bit faster. And I think that this is a good segue for me to go back to your questions. So what are some advantages of a single extruder versus dual extruder? I would say the speed, right? The main reason why you could want to use a single extrusion process, even with the method, right, is the fact that by using breakaway supports, you don't have that toggle back and forth between extruders, and that means that you're saving time. It all depends on the geometry that you're trying to create, but it comes down to that. That's the single most important one. how can you print different materials or colors with just a single extruder? Well, you would swap the material out. So as I showed you before, take the material here, unload it, load a second material, and we have quite a bit. I don't have all of them here. The sketch comes with two materials in the box, ready to go. Comes with yellow and blue, I think, and a small gray, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, basically, you can just print with different. And if you're asking about this assembly specifically, I just printed the different parts separately. So I chose different colors for each of the parts, and that's how I was able to have multiple colors in the same object. Let's say, do you need a raft with a heated build plate? You don't, but it's recommended, right? As I said, if you want to use a full build volume of Sketch, and I'll show you what that looks like here in just a second. So let me go back to MakerBot Print, and instead of showing you guys this cube, or actually, I could still use this cube, right? You can see in the scale section, right? This scale is saying that this cube is about 140 millimeters cubed, right? However, as we said before, the sketch itself is about 150. That's a max build volume. If I click scale to max right here, right, it's going to stay there at 140. However, here it's going to change 140, stay at 140. If I change here in print settings the raft to none, right, that means I won't be using a raft. I'll be just using the heated build plate, and go back here, scale to max. There we go, 150 cube millimeters, right? So that actually allows you to use the full build volume. And to answer the question, do you need rafts with a heated build plate? Not necessarily. I recommend it if you want to save some time, then it's and a little bit of material, then it's good. But just to have that peace of mind of that first layer, I've seen a ton of memes about, just that first layer and how that can make or break your print, basically. It's just better. I like it better. You don't necessarily have to do that. How many models can you print on the build plate? As many as you want. As long as they fit in the build plate, you can just put them in the build plate, and I'll show you what that looks like here. So I could, for example, say, no, you know what? I want this cube to be 20% of its size, really small. Go here, move the cube, duplicate it. To duplicate it, I'm just using like Control C and Control V, so copy and pasting it. And you can see I already have 1, 2, 3. There we go. Quite a few of these cubes placed, and it's just auto placing them in the build plate. So you can have as many models as you can fit within the build plate. What are the disadvantages of printing with a single extruder? I would say it's mainly that support, right? For some of the geometries that you might want to print, the single extrusion might limit you in how complex those geometries can be. It's really hard, to be honest, to get to that point, right? You really have to be doing some engineering work. And as I said, it depends on who you are, right? If you're a kid who's just at school trying to get those ideas out, you can do fairly complex assemblies. I'll take this little hand ripper again as an example. You can do really complex things with a single extrusion. Remember that 5-10 years ago, all of the printers had a single extrusion. So it depends on who you are and what you're trying to do. Big disadvantages, the supports. That's about it. How long does a heating process take? Well, you saw it right here, right? It took, about 5, less than that, maybe 2 minutes for the build plate to heat up and then for the extruder to heat up, and it's already printing. It's at 2% already. This print is about 7 hours, so we're talking about this cube element right here. So it's really fast. It's not slow at all. How long does it take to set up the sketch printer? I actually have a video of that. I don't have it here, but we will be releasing it later in the week of me setting the sketch here. It takes like 30 minutes from opening the box to having it running, right? The printer comes already pre-assembled. It's definitely a simple printer, but it's unlike many of the printers that we see that you have to actually assemble everything and put everything together. It's just out of the box, plug and play almost, right? So you take the printer out of the box, you load the material, you run the FRE, which is the first run experience, And that's about it. You set up your Wi-Fi, you make sure that the printer is connected, and you're ready to go. It's about 30 minutes overall. What other materials can Sketch print with? We offer two materials, PLA and TOF. TOF, awesome material to prototype parts that need to be a little bit stronger. It's fairly close to ABS. It's not ABS, but it's close to that. And PLA, which is super friendly for using indoors. It's basically, it's a derived from cornstarch. Uh, Incredibly safe material to use, but it's those two materials. And as I said, with Sketch, unlike what happens with Method, we're more focused on the object itself. We're not so much worried about the properties or the material properties of the object that you're going to be printing. Is it possible to split the two Sketch printers up and share the printers with teachers? 100%. So that's a good point, right? If I go to the site, and I'll show you the site real quick, and actually I think that's going to start eating up our time, but with the site, you see that the Sketch Classroom actually comes with two printers, right? It's quite literally, if I go to what's in the box, and you see it throughout the site, two printers, two printers, two printers. This is what comes in the box, right? Two printers, a bunch of build plates, two spatulas, two pliers, 6 spools of filament, the subscription of MakerBot Cloud, and the subscription for MakerBot University. So that's something that I didn't even mention right now, right? With Sketch, you do get access to MakerBot, to our dedicated platform for learning on 3D printing. So you do get the access to certification, which is great. If you're just getting started, it's just going to take you through the steps of how do you print, how do you set up your printer, how do you start your files, everything that you need to know to get started specifically in the classroom. And it'll cover you on 2 levels, whether you want to be an educator or whether you want to be a student. This comes with licenses for students and for kids. The printers you can easily split between teachers. We see it a lot in schools where they'll place one in one of the classrooms, or maybe you have, the reason why we bundle them up into 2 printers in a single kit is because we think that actually allows you to have a better cadence of the projects that you are printing, right? It actually means that if I am already printing something here, I am not sort of stuck waiting for this to finish. I can have more projects and more kids having access to this. Right now, and this is side comment completely like unrelated to us, but it's like if you have a friend, if you have a neighbor who you're both like kind of stuck inside, you want to do something for the summer, and this is something that I commented with some of my friends who have kids. It's like, why don't you get one, right? You just share the printers, you get one printer, your neighbor gets the other printer, and you get going, you sort of collaborate and print together. I think personally I would kill for like such an experience over the summer, just having the ability to print and imagine stuff and get a little bit doing something different while you're stuck inside. I don't know, that's my take on it. Highly recommended. This is just really simple, straightforward. Is a Sketch printer sold as a single unit? So yeah, that's kind of good. No, it's not. No, it's not right now. But I would highly encourage you guys to look into the bundle. The product itself was developed with classrooms in mind. If you have a friend who's willing to split the cost, if you have somebody else who's also interested, which I'm sure you can find, it's a great investment, especially for the summer, for the summertime. So short answer is no. If you have some questions, do reach out to our sales team. But I still highly recommend the printer, especially if you're somebody who's just getting started. And it's a great option. Great option. Super quiet. Have it inside. I really like it. I'll show some more complicated projects. I just started with the basics, but now we're out of time. I know that you guys have other questions, and I'll try to answer them later on. But do send them out also our different emails, so you can visit our website, makerbot.com/chats, hello@makerbot.com, Felipe at makerbot.com, that's FELIPE at makerbot.com, or in social media, both Instagram and Twitter at MakerBot. We'll be there, happy to answer all of your questions. And in the meantime, hopefully you get some printing time done. I'll see you next time, and thank you guys again for joining us today. Bye.